I shouted for help, but nobody helped me. So I put my hands on my face. I saw the blood oozing.
Asian and Pacific Islander Americans are facing a surge of attacks in the U.S. The rise in violence has sparked fear within the AAPI community. We went to New York City, where police data shows there's been a 1,900% increase in hate crimes against Asians.
Asian piece of shit.
Racism against Asian Americans isn't new. So what is causing the rise of attacks?
Do we know if all of these attacks are racially motivated?
We do not know that, but look, they are unprovoked.
Rallies have been held across the country to highlight the urgency of the issue.
Justice for Asians!
This is a story of how Asian Americans are finding solidarity in one another despite a wave of attacks.
所以我的心里很不高兴，我一想到他们，我的心就放下一点。
We will be invisible no more. We will speak up. And we say that we are American too.
You're looking at the face of a Filipino-American man who was slashed while standing on a train to work.
That was Wednesday, February 3rd, and about 8 o'clock, I was at the L train. I stood there quietly. A man came and stood beside me. He started kicking my bag. He came towards me. I thought he's going to punch me. But when I didn't feel anything, I saw his hand with a boxer cutter. I shouted for help, but nobody helped me.
Noel is still unsure what motivated the attack. The police have not called it a hate crime.
I don't know if it is because of the pandemic. I really don't know because I'm Asian. I have no idea. So sorry. Well, I am good, but it's not just like me. If it's just me, it's okay. But I also live with other people,
Noel considers himself lucky. He's mourning for the victims who have not survived, like this 84-year-old Thai man who died 2 days after an attack on his regular morning walk. Since the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020, more than 2,800 self-reported accounts of violent and non-violent anti-Asian hate were recorded by a rights group. It's widely believed the spike in racist attacks is due to Donald Trump's rhetoric on coronavirus.
Kung flu.
But the reality is more complicated than that. It's difficult to pinpoint one root cause for the surge in attacks, but some say a combination of the rhetoric blaming Asians, particularly during the pandemic, along with the ease of recording and sharing these attacks, has contributed to making the issue more visible. We spoke to Representative Judy Chu, who says racism against Asians in the US goes far beyond Trump's presidency.
Of course, we have a very long history in this country, going all the way back to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882.
It was the first legislation to bar immigration of an ethnic group. Yet, Asian Americans have played an indispensable role in building the country.
The Chinese Americans were responsible for the transcontinental railroad from the West Coast to Utah. But now, we see that Asian Americans of all backgrounds are essential workers. They are the ones that are on the front lines of the COVID-19 response.
To combat the recent crimes, New York City created an Asian hate crime task force. But many say more policing is not the answer. This is how a younger generation of Asian Americans are responding to their elderly who are in fear. Dozens of Asian restaurants and volunteers come together every Wednesday to gather thousands of food packages.
It actually started because my girlfriend and I were experiencing racism firsthand. People saying very nasty, profane language, telling us to go back to where we're from. At the same time, we were hearing about food insecurity and our elderly also being violently attacked the same time last year.
Despite the stereotype that Asian Americans are flourishing economically, Asians are experiencing record unemployment and hunger. In New York City, almost 1 out of 4 Asians were unemployed in 2020, and businesses in Chinatown have been suffering.
So we decided to counter all of that negativity and hatred with love. And how do we express love in the Asian culture? Many times is through food.
Mrs. and Mr. Lee say they only go out once a month because they're scared. To them, these bags mean much more than a hearty meal.
我们两个好孤独的，所以我的心里很不高兴。我一想到他们，我的心就放下一点。
对他们志愿者要说什么？有什么信息吗？
他呢，每次来做我的心理辅导我有什么事情，好吗？这样什么我都跟他讲。
So what can the government do to protect those like Mr. and Mrs. Lee? President Biden signed a memorandum condemning anti-Asian hate, but Asian lawmakers say there is more to be done.
We immediately asked for a meeting with the Department of Justice. We want to talk to look for ways to better prosecute such crimes. In addition, we are pushing the No Hate Act. The No Hate Act improves the hate crime reporting in the country.
As of now, lawmakers say it's rare these attacks are prosecuted as hate crimes, as it's difficult to prove racist intent. The suspect in Noel's case has been arrested and charged with assault. Yet Noel is moving onward, starting with acceptance.
Do you think you can forgive him for what he did?
Oh, yes. Yeah, everybody deserves forgiveness, yeah. Whatever hardships or grievances that he had in the past, he has to forgo it and live a peaceful life, and he would be happy.
What does the scar mean to you right now?
To me, it's maybe it will give me something to strengthen me. That you live, that you go on living and not feel sorry about for yourself.
Some of the perpetrators and suspects in recent attacks against Asians have been identified as Black, which has sparked conversations about anti-Blackness among Asian Americans. Tensions between the two marginalized communities date back decades. Conflicts peaked in 1992 when around 2,000 Korean-owned businesses were burned and looted in the aftermath of the police beating of Rodney King. Tensions between the groups had been festering after a Korean shop owner fatally shot a 15-year-old Black girl in the same month.
What is contributing to this kind of tension is the false stereotype that Asian Americans are a model minority and that they are better off than others.
Yet leaders from the Black Lives Matter movement have been quick to decry the violence against Asian Americans.
We cannot give into hating each other. We cannot give into dividing each other. We need to be a unified front.
We have to rely on our neighbors and our friends to stand up for us when injustices are happening. As many Asians have come out to support, Black Lives Matter, that have historically fought together side by side for many of the civil rights that we enjoy.
Noel is joining the movement as well, sharing his story, hoping to prevent another tragedy.
I never knew that nobody would help me in this kind of instance. I hope that there should be an awareness.
Many Asian Americans say their trauma has been rendered invisible, their voices often unheard in the face of systemic racism. But times are changing.
This means we've had enough.
We are a force to be reckoned with, and that we care, and that this is a movement we are invested in sustaining.
This march is about unity. I want to bring awareness to the fact that we are here for the same fight. The fight to end systemic racism.
Asian Americans just tend to get erased as a whole in the country. We still have a common enemy. The common enemy is racism.
Justice for Asians! Justice for Asians!
Anti-Asian racism is deadly. It's real. It is growing stronger and more powerful.
America was rocked by another mass killing this week when at least 8 people were killed in shootings at 3 massage parlors in Atlanta.
We should be treating hate crimes as such. And make no mistake, these women were targeted on the basis of their race. Some of these incidents were not treated as hate crimes, and that's unacceptable. The people in the Asian American community know that we are being targeted.
The attack comes amid a backdrop of growing violence against Asians that has escalated through the coronavirus pandemic.
Since the pandemic, it got so much worse. And what we are seeing, is not only increasing of the numbers, but I guess the seriousness of the attacks are getting more and more violent.
The White House says former President Donald Trump is partly to blame.
I think there's no question that some of the damaging rhetoric that we saw during the prior administration, blaming, calling COVID, the Wuhan virus or other things, led to perceptions of the Asian American community that are inaccurate, unfair, has elevated threats against Asian Americans.
In 2020, hate crimes against Asian people in the U.S. went up by 150%, with as many as 3,800 reports of hate incidents since mid-March 2020. Elderly Asian men have been killed on the streets of San Francisco and Phoenix, while other Asian seniors were injured in similar attacks in Oakland and New York City. Iona Cheng, a Chinese-American cancer researcher, is among the victims.
As they approached me, they pulled me to the ground. They punched me. I was resisting with them. I was yelling. I was screaming. I understand as a victim, it is really hard to speak about these crimes. But I feel that it's very important to let others know that this is happening to our community, to speak out against it, to support one another.
Many are speaking up, including community activists and celebrities of Asian descent.
There's something going on, and we need your help, and we need everyone to get angry for us. We need help. There are people that are just afraid to leave their homes, and they're coming after the elderly. You can't go after the most vulnerable in our community and get away with it.
Many residents and volunteers in Oakland's Chinatown, which has seen a spate of assaults, have started patrolling the streets themselves.
Asians have been scapegoated and blamed for the pandemic. And this is not new to our community. It's something that elected officials peddled in terms of blaming our communities, and that's led to the attacks against our community.
President Biden has said he's keeping all those affected by the shootings in his prayers. As he told the nation, the recent attacks are un-American, and they must
Anti-Asian hate did not begin with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it will not end when the pandemic is over. All the pandemic did was exacerbate latent anti-Asian prejudices that have long and ugly history in America. It's also provided an excuse for some to act on those prejudices. In fact, there have been discrimination against lots of people in this country, and all of that has been exacerbated.
Here for my white
It is personal because my mom was one of the victims of the hate crime. 2 months ago in Amherst on Broadway of Whitney Avenue, she randomly got attacked. She left a scar on her cheek. The scar might heal, but the scar on her heart, on her mentality is not.
Stay away from each other. There must have been a reason for that. Why are you going around touting yourself as a good Buddhist person? Why are you telling people that Asians don't marry outside their race? When Asians do marry outside their race, do you mean you don't marry black people outside their race? Because I had to ask, as one of the Chinese, once again, doing with the Muslims locked up in their country. Why do the good Chinese have Muslims locked up in their country? For no reason other than being Muslim. Did you answer that? You got the Yemenis, you got the Saudi Arabians, and all these different people. So I asked myself, well, why do these people not associate? Why do these people stay away from each other? There must have been a reason for that. Another thing I had to ask, as one of the Chinese, once again, doing with the Muslims locked up in their country. Why do the good Chinese have Muslims locked up in their country? For no reason other than being Muslim. Did you answer that? Since you should be so ethical, and you seem to be such a good Buddhist. Where we know that Buddhism is not a Chinese religion. Buddhism is an Indian religion. Why are you going around touting yourself as a good Buddhist person? Why are you telling people that Asians don't marry outside their race? When Asians do marry outside their race, do you mean you don't marry black people outside their race? Because the highest rate of interracial marriage is between white males and Asian women.
Nung hindi ako nag-react, nag-smile ako, so hindi niya ako nilapitan na. Pero nakabantay ako kasi nakikita ko baka pwede niya akong sipain o pwede niya akong kung may ano yung hawak siya na matalim.
I'm gonna wrap it up, man. On that note, about 10 years ago, that are out right now. One more time for my brother.